Alaska isn't for the faint of heart. It's more than just a state, it's a frozen continent that demands respect and blood. In a land ruled by apex predators and relentless cold, only the bravest souls survive. Good evening, friends. Please leave a like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel to help me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers. Now, settle into the darkness and listen closely. Here are 4 true horror stories from the last frontier. Welcome to the cold. In Alaska, weakness gets you killed. That's what my father told me when I was 12, standing over a freshly gutted moose in our backyard in Wasilla. The cold doesn't care about your feelings. The darkness doesn't negotiate. The wilderness doesn't forgive. So I learned to be strong. I learned to get fish with hands so numb I couldn't feel the knife. I learned to sleep in negative 40 degrees. I learned to track, to hunt, to survive. That's why I became a ranger. That's why, at 34, I thought I could handle anything Denali National Park threw at me. I was wrong. It started on February 3rd, 2023. The kind of winter day where the sun barely bothers to show up, just a weak smear of light across the horizon before giving up around 3 in the afternoon. I was doing a routine patrol along the Savage River, snowshoeing through chest-deep powder, my breath crystallizing in the air before it could reach my face. The thermometer read negative 18, but with wind chill, it felt like stepping into a meat locker designed by God himself to punish the arrogant. That's when I noticed the silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence you read about in those bullshit nature magazines sold to tourists in Talkeetna. This was wrong. Oppressive. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums like water pressure. I stopped walking, my snowshoes sinking another inch into the drift. Listened. Nothing. No ravens. No ptarmigan. No squirrels chittering in the spruce trees. And most disturbingly, no wolves. Denali has one of the healthiest wolf populations in North America. During winter, they're everywhere. You hear them constantly, howling to coordinate hunts, warning off rival packs, communicating across miles of frozen tundra. The Savage River pack alone had 15 members. I'd been documenting them for 3 years. I knew their howls the way a mother knows her baby's cry. They should have been hunting. Should have been vocal. But there was nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid. Exhausted. I'd been pulling double shifts because Hansen, the other ranger assigned to this quadrant, was out with pneumonia. Sleep deprivation does weird things to your brain. Makes you see patterns where there aren't any. Makes you hear silence where there's probably just wind. I continued my patrol, but the wrongness followed me like a shadow. Every ridge I climbed, every frozen creek I crossed, nothing. No tracks. No scat. No kill sites. Wolves are messy eaters, they leave evidence everywhere. But the snow was pristine, undisturbed except for my own trail. By day 3, I couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't exhaustion. This was real. I expanded my patrol radius, covering nearly 40 square miles. Nothing. It was as if every wolf in the region had simply vanished. Evaporated. I checked with the other rangers, Willis down in the south sector, Martinez near Wonder Lake. Same story. No wolves. No owls. No signs. The Park Service told me not to worry. Wolves migrate, they said. Weather patterns, they said. Prey dispersal, they said. All perfectly normal explanations delivered by people sitting in heated offices in Fairbanks, sipping coffee, staring at computer screens instead of living in the reality of what was happening out here. On day 4, I found the camp. It was tucked into a small valley about 8 miles northeast of my station, hidden behind a natural windbreak of black spruce. I almost missed it, just caught a flash of green tarp through the trees. My gut twisted immediately. This was February in Denali. Nobody camps here in February. Nobody's sane, anyway. I approached carefully, hand on my radio, ready to call for backup. But as I got closer, I realized the camp was abandoned. Recently. The snow around the tent was trampled, but fresh powder had already started filling in the boot prints. Maybe 6, 7 hours old. They'd left in a hurry. The tent itself was high quality, mountain hardware, expensive shit, the kind serious Arctic researchers use. The flaps were open, snapping in the wind. Inside, I found equipment. Lots of it. Professional recording gear, parabolic microphones, digital recorders, laptop computers, hard drives. And in the corner, 3 portable freezers. My hands were shaking as I opened the first one. Not from cold. From something else. Something primitive in my brainstem screaming at me to leave, to run, to get the fuck away from this place. Inside the freezer, meat. Chunks of raw caribou and moose, carefully butchered, vacuum sealed. And mixed throughout, small paper packets. I opened one. White powder. I touched it to my tongue. Bitter. Chemical. Strychnine, maybe, or something worse. Someone had laced dozens of pounds of meat with poison. I stood there in that abandoned camp, surrounded by recording equipment and poisoned meat, and understood. Someone was systematically killing the wolves. Broadcasting silence while they worked. Creating a dead zone. But why? I radioed it in immediately. Took photos. Documented everything. The Park Service dispatched an investigation team, but it would take them 2 days to reach this location. Until then, I was instructed to continue monitoring. That night, back at my station, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. The wind against the walls sounded like footsteps. The creak of settling ice sounded like breathing. I told myself it was just stress. Just adrenaline. Just the natural paranoia that comes from finding evidence of wildlife crimes in one of the most remote places on Earth. Around midnight, I heard it. A wolf howl. Clear as a bell. Close. I grabbed my spotlight and ran outside, scanning the tree line. The howl came again, from the west. Then another from the east. Then south. Impossible. Wolves don't surround a building. Don't coordinate like that. I stood in the snow in my thermal underwear and parka, spinning in circles, trying to locate them. The howls sounded wrong. Too perfect. Too identical. Like copies. Like recordings. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I ran back inside, pulled up the topographic maps on my computer, marked where I heard each howl. Then I grabbed my handheld radio direction finder, usually used for tracking collared animals, and tuned it to pick up any electronic signals. Bingo! For distinct sources. Not wolves. Speakers. Hidden in the forest. Broadcasting wolf howls. Someone was faking the presence of wolves. Leading me somewhere. But who? And why? I spent the next 3 days methodically tracking down those speakers. Found them mounted in trees, camouflaged with natural materials, powered by heavy-duty batteries designed to last months. Sophisticated equipment. Professional. Expensive. This wasn't some amateur poacher operation. This was organized. Funded. Planned. On the 6th day, Following the trail of speakers deeper into the backcountry, I found the cabin. It sat in a clearing I'd never noticed before, despite having worked this area for 3 years. A small structure, barely more than a shed, walls withered gray by decades of exposure. No smoke from the chimney. No footprints approaching it. But something about it made my skin crawl. The door was unlocked. I should have waited for backup. Should have called it in. Should have followed protocol. But I was exhausted, running on maybe 4 hours of sleep in the last 72 hours, my judgment impaired, my curiosity overwhelming my common sense. I told myself I was just checking for squatters. Just doing my job. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Not decay, worse. Obsession. The stale air of a space occupied by madness. The cabin was one room, maybe 10 by 12 feet. And every square inch of wall space was covered. Photos. Hundreds of them. Thousands. All of me. Me at my station. Me on patrol. Me eating lunch on a ridge overlooking the Toklat River. Me sleeping in my bunk, taken through the window. Me showering. Me getting dressed. Me in moments I thought were private, moments I thought were mine, captured from angles that should have been impossible. Some of the photos were months old. I recognized the jacket I'd worn last September. The haircut I had in November. Others were recent, from yesterday, from the day before. Whoever was taking these pictures had been following me for at least 6 months. Maybe longer. On a small table in the center of the room, a calendar. My schedule. My patrol routes. My shifts. Every detail of my routine documented with meticulous precision. Handwritten notes and margins. Target leaves station 0630. Returns 1845. Predictable. Vulnerable during Savage River check. Window unlocked north side. My legs went weak. I grabbed the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. This wasn't about wolves. This had never been about wolves. The poisoned meat, the dead zone, the recordings, all of it was just stage dressing. A performance. The real target was me. Next to the calendar, a journal. I opened it with trembling hands. The handwriting was neat, controlled, disturbingly normal looking. Day 187, subject maintains same routine. Coffee at 0600. Shit at 0630. Patrol 0700. She's comfortable. Complacent. Soon. Day 203, she noticed the wolves. Took longer than expected. Not as observant as her file suggested. Disappointing. Day 219, she found the camp. Good. Everything is proceeding correctly. She needs to understand how vulnerable she is. How completely I know her. How thoroughly I own every moment of her life. My file? What fucking file? I flipped backward through the journal, looking for answers, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the pages. The entries went back 18 months. Before I'd even been assigned to this sector. Someone had been planning this for a year and a half. And then I saw it. Paperclipped to one of the earlier pages, a personnel document from the Park Service database. My hiring paperwork. My background check. My photograph. Medical records. Social security number. Everything. Stolen. Downloaded. Studied. Someone inside the Park Service had leaked my information. Or someone had hacked the system. Either way, this went deeper than a random stalker. This was coordinated. Organized. Professional. The walls seemed to close in around me. Every photo staring down. Hundreds of versions of myself trapped in that cabin, watching me realize the horror of my situation. I had to get out. Had to get help. Had to. The floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, reaching for my radio. The doorway was empty. Just wind moving through the trees. Just paranoia. Just exhaustion playing tricks. I was alone. Except I wasn't. I ran. Didn't bother closing the door. Didn't stop to document the scene or take photos or follow any kind of protocol. I just ran, crashing through the forest, my snowshoes tangling in undergrowth, my breath tearing at my lungs, my heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted to escape my body. I made it back to my station in 40 minutes, a route that usually took 2 hours. Locked every door. Covered every window. Called the Park Service on the satellite phone. They said investigators were already en route. Would arrive by morning. Just sit tight. Stay calm. Sit tight. In a building whose layout someone had memorized. Whose windows they photographed from inside. Whose vulnerabilities they documented in neat handwritten notes. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in the corner farthest from the windows with my service pistol in my lap and every light in the station blazing. Watched the darkness outside press against the glass. Listened to every sound. Jumped to every shadow. Around 4 a.m., I heard it again. The wolf howls. But now I knew they were fake, the sound was different. Hollow. Mocking. Whoever was out there wanted me to know they were still watching. Still in control. Still orchestrating this entire nightmare. The investigators arrived at dawn. Federal agents, not just Park Service. They took my statement. Secured the cabin. Collected evidence. Found fingerprints on the photos, but they belonged to someone with no criminal record, no DNA in any database, someone who essentially didn't exist in any official capacity. They found the speakers. The poisoned meat. The equipment. But they never found the person. No arrests were made. No suspects identified. The case went cold within a month. The official explanation, a disturbed individual, probably a former Park Service employee, obsessed with rangers, likely left the state. Be vigilant. Take precautions. Get counseling. But I know better. I moved to Anchorage. Quit the Park Service. Take 4 different medications just to function, Xanax for the panic attacks, Ambien for the insomnia, Zoloft for the depression, Abilify for the intrusive thoughts. I see a therapist twice a week. She says I'm making progress. She's lying. I can't be alone. Can't stand silence. Can't go near forests. The smell of pine trees makes me vomit. I sleep with every light on in my apartment. I've changed my phone number 6 times. I don't use social media. I cover the camera on my laptop with electrical tape. Because sometimes, late at night, I still get emails. No sender. No subject line. Just attachments. Photos of me. Recent ones. Walking to work. Buying groceries. Sitting in my therapist's waiting room. Whoever was in that cabin is still out there. Still watching. Still documenting. Still waiting for the right moment to finish whatever they started. And the worst part, the thing that keeps me awake even through the Ambien, is knowing they're patient. Knowing they planned this for 18 months before I even knew they existed. Knowing they have resources, intelligence, access to systems I can't even imagine. Knowing that in Alaska, the real predators don't have fur and fangs. They have cameras and calendars and the ability to make you disappear in broad daylight while everyone assumes you're just paranoid. Just exhausted. Just crazy. They told me to be strong. To survive. To endure. But nobody told me what to do when the thing hunting you is smarter than you are. When it knows you better than you know yourself. When it's already inside your head, living rent-free in your nightmares, waiting. Still waiting. Always waiting. I came to Alaska to study death. Not human death, I'm not that morbid, but the mathematical patterns of predator-prey relationships, the beautiful equations that govern who lives and who gets torn apart in the snow. My dissertation at UAF focused on brown bear foraging behavior, and at 28, I thought I understood violence. I thought I understood fear. I thought the worst thing that could happen in the wilderness was getting mauled by a 1,000-pound apex predator. I was catastrophically wrong. September in Alaska is gorgeous in a way that makes your chest ache. The tundra bleeds red and gold, the air smells like rain and rotting leaves, and the bears are in hyperphagia, frantically gorging themselves before winter comes to seal them in their dens. I've been tracking a large male brown bear, designation GB47, for 3 weeks through the Chugach State Park backcountry, about 40 miles northeast of Anchorage. 700 pounds of muscle and hunger, leading tracks the size of dinner plates in the mud along Eagle River. That's what I thought I was tracking, anyway. On September 19th, following what I believe were fresh prints along a game trail near Eklutna Lake, I noticed something that made me stop. Made my brain stutter. The track in front of me was perfect. Too perfect. Bear paws have variations, worn pads, missing claws, individual characteristics like fingerprints. But this track was identical to the one 20 feet behind it. Exactly identical. Same depth. Same spacing between toe impressions. Same everything. I crouched down, pulled out my calipers, measured. The depth was uniform to the millimeter. Impossible. A walking bear shifts its weight. The ground has variations. Nothing in nature creates perfectly identical impressions. Unless they're not real. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Paranoid. I'd been in the field for 18 days straight, sleeping in a tent, eating freeze-dried shit that tasted like salted cardboard, pissing in the woods like a goddamn animal. Sleep deprivation causes hallucinations. Makes you see patterns and randomness. I was probably just exhausted, my scientific training causing me to overanalyze normal biological phenomena. But I couldn't shake it. I followed the tracks another mile, and the perfection continued. Every single print identical. Mechanically precise. And then I noticed something worse, the tracks never deviated. Bears meander. They investigate interesting smells, pause to dig for roots, stop to scratch trees. These tracks walked in a straight line with the determination of something on rails, something programmed, something fundamentally wrong. The trail led into a valley I'd never explored before, a narrow ravine choked with alder and devil's club, the kind of miserable terrain that tears your clothes and skin with equal enthusiasm. The tracks continued straight into it, and against every instinct screaming at me to turn back, I followed. That's where I found them. The traps. They were sophisticated, not the simple leg-hold traps you see in frontier museums, but industrial-grade snares made from aircraft cable, mounted on hydraulic mechanisms buried in the ground. Designed to grab a bear's leg and rip it completely off. I counted 7 of them arranged in a semicircle, all perfectly camouflaged, all freshly maintained with oiled components and new cables. Each one capable of generating enough force to amputate a human limb at the femur. And the fake bear tracks led directly to them. Someone was herding bears into a killing field. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my satellite phone to call fish and game. This was serious federal wildlife crime, poaching on an industrial scale, probably connected to the illegal bear parts trade. Gallbladders, paws, and claws can fetch tens of thousands on the black market. But as I raised the phone, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Boot prints. Fresh ones. Human. Size 11 or 12. Leading away from the traps. Whoever set these had been here recently. Maybe hours ago. And then I saw the second set of prints. Coming toward me. From behind. I spun around, heart hammering. Nothing. Just trees. Just shadows. Just wind moving through branches. I was alone. Of course I was alone. The prints were probably old, just looked fresh because of recent rain. I was being paranoid again. Exhausted. My mind playing tricks. But the prints weren't old. They were crisp. Sharp-edged. Made within the last few hours at most. Someone had walked up behind me while I was examining the traps. Had stood there. Watching. Then circled around me and left. I ran. Didn't think about it. Didn't plan. Just pure animal panic, crashing through the undergrowth, branches whipping my face, my backpack slamming against my spine, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I made it maybe half a mile before I had to stop, doubled over, vomiting freeze-dried stroganoff into the ferns. That's when I realized I'd left my GPS unit at the trap site. Fuck. It had all my waypoints, my camp location, my entire research data for the season. I needed it. But more importantly, it had my name and university affiliation engraved on the back. Whoever found it would know exactly who I was. I forced myself to go back. Crept through the forest like prey, every sense screaming at me to detect threats. When I reached the trap site, my GPS was gone. In its place, on the exact rock where I'd set it, a Ziploc bag. Inside the bag, photographs. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I opened it. The first photo showed me setting up camp 4 days ago. The second showed me cooking dinner that night. The third showed me asleep in my tent, taken from maybe 6 feet away through the mesh. The fourth showed me squatting to shit behind a tree yesterday morning. Someone had been following me. Documenting me. Photographing me in my most vulnerable moments. 4 days. Maybe longer. I looked at the remaining photos with a dread so profound it felt like drowning. They showed other people, hikers, solo backpackers, other researchers. All photographed without their knowledge. All in the same area. And written on the back of each photo in neat handwriting, dates. The dates were all within the last 3 months. And next to each date, deterred or relocated or, and this made my bladder nearly release, neutralized. The final photo in the stack was of me. Taken this morning. And on the back, today's date. No notation yet. Just a question mark. My brain couldn't process it fast enough. Someone was systematically clearing this area of human presence. The fake bear tracks were herding real bears into the traps, killing them, creating a narrative of danger that would keep people away. But the traps weren't just for bears. They were warnings. And anyone who discovered them, like I had, became a problem that needed to be neutralized. I heard the snap of a branch behind me. Close. Maybe 30 feet. This time when I ran, I didn't stop. I ran for 3 hours straight, following the drainage back toward the main trail, not caring about the noise I made, not caring about leaving a trail. I just needed to reach civilization, reach other people, reach safety. I made it to the Eklutna trailhead at dusk. My car was there. Safe. Untouched. I fumbled with my keys, hands still shaking, and that's when I saw it. A note under my windshield wiper. You have good instincts. Most don't run fast enough. I drove straight to the Alaska State Trooper's office in Palmer. Gave a statement. Showed them the photos. Led them back to the trap site the next day with a full tactical team, 8 troopers, fish and game agents, federal wildlife investigators. The traps were gone. All of them. The site had been completely sanitized. No cables. No hydraulic mechanisms. No evidence of anything. Just natural forest floor, undisturbed, like I'd imagined the whole thing. But they found something else. 3 sets of skeletal remains, partially scattered by scavengers, buried in shallow graves within a quarter-mile of the trap site. Hikers who'd been reported missing over the past 2 years. All solo backpackers. All last seen entering the Eklutna area. Cause of death, massive traumatic amputation consistent with industrial snare mechanisms. The investigation went federal. FBI. ATF. They brought in ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, forensic anthropologists. Found 2 more bodies. Maybe pieces of a 6th, too decomposed to be certain. All killed the same way, caught in traps designed for bears but calibrated for human limbs. They never found who did it. No fingerprints on the photos. The note was printed on standard copy paper available at any Walmart. The burial sites were months old, no useful forensic evidence remaining. No witnesses. No suspects. No arrests. The official theory, a survivalist or anti-government extremist, probably military-trained, living off-grid in the Chugach backcountry, paranoid about territory, willing to kill to maintain isolation. Likely relocated after I discovered the traps. Possibly left Alaska entirely. But I know better. 2 weeks after my interview with the FBI, I found a package on my doorstep in Anchorage. No return address. No postage. Hand-delivered. Inside, a professional wildlife camera, the kind researchers use. And a USB drive. The drive contained footage. 6 months of footage. Me doing field work. Me at the university. Me at the grocery store. Me at the gym. Me on dates with Marcus, the guy I'd been seeing casually. Me in my apartment, filmed through the window, getting dressed, sleeping, watching TV. And interspersed throughout, footage of the bears. Real bears. GB-47 and others. Walking naturally through the forest. The camera had been tracking them too, learning their patterns, their behaviors, their routes. And then the footage showed something that made me vomit right there on my kitchen floor. It showed someone, wearing full camouflage, face obscured, placing the fake tracks. Methodically pressing a molded rubber stamp into the ground along specific routes. Creating a false trail that would lead the bears directly toward the traps. And lead me, following those tracks, into the kill zone. The whole thing had been engineered. The bears weren't the target. I was. The bears were just bait, and I'd followed them like a fish following a lure, straight into the jaws of something patient and calculating and far more dangerous than any animal. The final clip on the drive was dated yesterday. It showed me walking into the trooper office in Palmer. And then it showed someone else walking out right after me. A person in unremarkable clothes, jeans, jacket, baseball cap. The face was visible for exactly 1 frame. I screen captured it, enlarged it, stared at it for hours. I'd never seen them before in my life. Just an ordinary-looking person. Could be anyone. Could be the guy who bags my groceries at Fred Meyer. Could be the woman who teaches yoga at my gym. Could be anyone in this city of 300,000 people, any one of whom could be watching me right now. I dropped out of the PhD program. Couldn't focus. Couldn't sleep. Started having panic attacks in the field, chest tightness, hyperventilation, the absolute certainty that I was being watched. My advisor suggested a medical leave. Suggested therapy. Suggested medication. I take 4 pills now just to get through the day. Klonopin for the anxiety. Ambien for the nightmares. Zoloft for the depression that came after, the crushing weight of knowing how close I came. And Abilify because the therapist thinks I have PTSD with paranoid features. But it's not paranoia when they're really watching you. I get packages sometimes. Every few months. No pattern. No warning. Just a small envelope on my doorstep. Always containing a single photograph. Me walking to work last Tuesday. Me buying coffee on Thursday. Me visiting my parents in Oregon over Christmas. The message is clear. I'm still being documented. Still being tracked. Still being studied like one of my research subjects. The person who killed 5 people, maybe more, to protect their territory is still out there. Still watching. Still taking notes. And the most terrifying part isn't that they could kill me anytime. It's that they're choosing not to. I'm more useful alive, apparently. A long-term study. An ongoing project. Maybe they're curious about what trauma does to human behavior. Maybe they're just entertained by my fear. I don't go into the wilderness anymore. Can't. The sight of trees makes me nauseous. I had a panic attack at Home Depot last month because they were selling bear-proof garbage cans and the smell of plastic and metal brought everything back, the traps, the photos, the running. My therapist says I need to reclaim my sense of safety. Build healthy boundaries. Practice mindfulness. She doesn't understand that there are no boundaries. No safe spaces. Not when someone has demonstrated they can breach any security, any distance, any protection. Last week I received another package. Heavier this time. Inside, my GPS unit. The one that went missing at the trap site a year ago. Still functional. Still containing all my data. And added to the waypoints, a new location, labeled home. I checked the coordinates. They're my apartment. Exact latitude and longitude. Stored in my own GPS unit 13 months ago, before I even lived here. Before I even started looking for apartments. They knew where I moved before I did. Knew my patterns. Knew my choices. Knew me better than I knew myself. I'm moving again. 3rd time this year. Out of state this time. Maybe Montana. Maybe Oregon. Somewhere without bears, without wilderness, without the possibility of running into something that knows how to make humans disappear. But I know it won't matter. The packages will find me. The photographs will continue. The invisible observer who turned me into a research subject will maintain their study with the same methodical patience they've shown for 18 months. In Alaska, I learned that the most efficient predators don't chase. They don't roar. They don't announce themselves. They just wait and watch and document and strike when you've forgotten to be afraid. And I'll never forget again. Even though I wish, desperately, that I could. I moved to Fairbanks for the light. Not sunlight, we get precious little of that in winter, but the aurora borealis, those ribbons of green and violet fire that dance across the Arctic sky like the breath of God made visible. I'm a photographer, 52 years old, divorced twice, no kids, and I'd spent 30 years shooting weddings in Sacramento before I realized I was documenting other people's happiness while drowning in my own emptiness. So I cashed out my 401k, bought a small house on Chena Hot Springs Road, and dedicated myself to capturing the most beautiful phenomenon on Earth. The auroras saved me, gave me purpose, gave me something to wake up for during those brutal February nights when the temperature drops to 40 below and your eyelashes freeze together if you blink too slowly outside. I should have known something that beautiful would attract something ugly. It started small. So small I convinced myself I was imagining it. March 7th, 2023, I remember the date because I captured a particularly spectacular aurora that night, a rare red corona that photographers wait years to see. I came home around 3 a.m., exhausted, hands numb despite my insulated gloves, and made myself tea. That's when I noticed the book on my kitchen counter. It was lying flat. I'd left it standing upright against the wall. I was certain of it. My copy of The Northern Lights by Lucy Yago, research material, and I positioned it vertically because the counter space was cluttered with camera equipment. Now it was flat. Pages down. Definitely moved. I stared at it for maybe 5 minutes, my tea growing cold in my hands, trying to remember if I'd moved it myself. Maybe that morning? Maybe I'd been distracted, thinking about shot composition, and had absent-mindedly laid it down? Sleep deprivation does weird things to memory. I'd been averaging 4 hours a night for 2 weeks, chasing the auroras, and exhaustion makes you sloppy. I went to bed telling myself I was being ridiculous. Old and paranoid and lonely. The trifecta pathetic. But 3 nights later, it happened again. My reading glasses, I'd left them on the arm of my couch. I was certain. Absolutely certain, because I'd been looking at aurora forecasts on my laptop, had taken off my glasses and set them on the wide wooden arm to my right. Specific memory. Clear image in my mind. When I came home from shooting at Murphy Dome, the glasses were on the coffee table. 2 feet away. Folded neatly. This time the unease was stronger. Sharper. My house is small, 900 square feet, 2 bedrooms, one I use as a darkroom, and I searched every closet, every corner, the crawl space, under the beds. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No disturbed windows. The deadbolts were engaged from the inside, same as I'd left them. I told myself it was early onset Alzheimer's. My mother had it. Started at 57 with little memory gaps, things misplaced, confusion about sequences of events. Maybe it was genetic. Maybe my brain was already beginning its slow betrayal, and these small dislocations were the first symptoms of the long goodbye. The thought terrified me more than any intruder. At least an intruder I could fight. Shoot. Call the police about. But if my own mind was the threat, if I couldn't trust my own memories, then I was already lost. I started documenting everything. Took photos before I left the house, countertops, furniture arrangements, object positions. Created a digital catalog I could reference when I returned. It felt insane, but it also felt necessary. If I was losing my mind, I needed evidence. Proof. Something concrete. March 19th, strong aurora forecast. KP index of 6, which meant excellent display potential. I set up on Cleary's summit around 11 p.m., and the lights were breathtaking, great undulating curtains of green and purple, moving across the sky like living things. I shot for 3 hours, hundreds of exposures, lost in the work, in the beauty, in the pure meditative flow state that makes you forget about cold and time and everything except light and composition. Got home at 2:30 a.m. Checked my documentation photos immediately. My coffee mug had moved 6 inches to the left. I'd photographed it on the right side of the counter, next to the sink. Now it was in the center, next to the stove. But this time there was something else. Something I hadn't documented because it hadn't been there before. A pen. One of my cheap ballpoints sitting on the counter. And next to it, a small piece of paper. My grocery list from 3 days ago. And on the back, in handwriting that wasn't mine, neat, precise, unsettling in its normalcy, 2 words. Beautiful work. My hands started shaking so violently I dropped my camera bag. The crash made me jump, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat, in my temples, in my fingertips. Someone had been in my house. While I was gone. Had moved through my space, touched my things, read my notes, looked at my photographs. And left a compliment like a calling card. I called the Alaska State Troopers. They came out that morning, 2 officers, professional but skeptical. Checked for signs of forced entry. Found nothing. Suggested I change my locks. Suggested security cameras. Suggested that maybe I had a friend with a key who'd stopped by, moved a few things, left a note. I didn't have friends in Fairbanks. Didn't have anyone with a key. Didn't have anyone who knew my shooting schedule, who would know when my house would be empty for hours at a time. Except whoever was doing this clearly knew. Knew exactly when I'd be gone. Knew my patterns. Knew me. I installed cameras. 6 of them. Covered every entrance, every window, motion activated, uploading to cloud storage. Spent $800 I couldn't afford. Changed all the locks. Added security bars to the windows. Turned my small peaceful house into a fortress. For a week, nothing happened. The cameras showed nothing. No mysterious movements. No evidence of intrusion. I started to relax. Started to think maybe the cameras had scared them off, whoever they were. Started to think maybe it was over. March 27th, Aurora forecast, KP7. Rare. Extraordinary. The kind of night photographers dream about. I hesitated. Actually considered staying home, missing the opportunity, choosing safety over my art. But the compulsion was too strong. The need to shoot, to capture, to create something beautiful in a world full of ugliness. I went to Esterdome. Set up my tripod. Shot until 4 a.m., and the auroras were magnificent, crimson and emerald and violet, corona formation overhead, the kind of display that happens maybe twice a year. I got images I knew would be career-defining. Portfolio pieces. Maybe even award-worthy. When I got home, I checked the camera feeds on my phone before I even got out of the car. All 6 cameras. Nothing. No alerts. No motion detected. The house was secure. But when I walked inside, I knew immediately something was wrong. The air felt different. Disturbed. Like someone had recently moved through it. And there, on my kitchen counter, carefully arranged, a printout of my bank statement. From my home office. From my locked file cabinet. Someone had been inside. Had bypassed my cameras somehow. Had gone through my private documents. Had violated not just my space but my financial privacy, my personal information, my life. And underneath the bank statement, another note: you should invest in better Aurora glass. The 14mm has noticeable chromatic aberration at f/2.8. Rockin' makes a good alternative. They weren't just breaking in. They were reviewing my work. Critiquing my technique. They'd looked at my photographs on my computer. Had studied them closely enough to notice lens defects. Had spent time in my house, casually going through my digital files like a gallery visitor examining art. I couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, and then stopped. What would I tell them? That someone broke in but the cameras showed nothing? That they left photography advice? That I had no evidence except objects slightly moved and notes in handwriting I couldn't trace? They'd think I was crazy. Hell, I was starting to think I was crazy. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in my kitchen with a baseball bat across my lap and all the lights on, watching the shadows, listening to every creak and groan of the house settling. My mind spun in circles, trying to understand. Trying to make it make sense. The cameras hadn't detected anything. That meant either the intruder knew how to bypass them, knew their blind spots, their technical limitations, or they'd hacked them somehow, looped the footage, made themselves invisible. Both options required technical sophistication. Planning. Intent. This wasn't random. This was targeted. Personal. Someone had chosen me specifically. But why? What did they want? Over the next 2 weeks, I became obsessed. Stopped shooting auroras. Stopped leaving the house except for groceries. Watched the camera feeds constantly. Slept in 2-hour increments. Started drinking heavily, bourbon, because it was what my father drank, because it made the fear manageable, made the paranoia feel less sharp. But the intrusions continued. Always on nights with strong aurora forecasts. Always when the entire photography community was outside, heads tilted back, cameras clicking, too distracted by the sky to pay attention to anything else. Small things. A book moved. A photograph on my wall tilted 3 degrees. My thermostat adjusted 2 degrees warmer. My coffee maker turned on so fresh coffee was brewing when I got home, a gesture that would have been kind if it wasn't absolutely fucking terrifying. And always, notes. Commentary on my technique. Suggestions for improvement. Observations about my composition choices. Written by someone who clearly understood photography at a professional level, someone whose technical knowledge rivaled my own. April 14th, I found something that changed everything. I'd torn apart my darkroom looking for hidden cameras, for bugs, for any explanation of how they were getting in undetected. And in the ceiling, behind a loose panel I'd never noticed before, I found it. A calendar. Not mine. Printed from a computer, high-quality paper. Covering the next 2 years. And marked on it, in that same precise handwriting, every single night with aurora forecast above KP5. Hundreds of dates. Highlighted. Annotated. Some marked good. Some marked excellent. Some marked optimal. They planned this. Had researched solar weather patterns, had predicted geomagnetic activity months in advance, had identified every night I'd be compelled to leave my house to chase the lights. And underneath the calendar, in a folder, photographs. Not of me. Of my house. Architectural photos, taken from inside, showing every room from multiple angles. Floor plans sketched in mechanical pencil. Notes about sidelines, camera positions, blind spots. And diagrams, detailed technical diagrams, showing exactly how to enter through the crawl space, bypass the window sensors, avoid the camera coverage, and move through the house undetected. This had been planned for months. Maybe longer. Someone had studied my house, mapped every detail, understood the security systems better than I did, and prepared a methodology for invisible intrusion that was both terrifying in its complexity and undeniable in its effectiveness. At the bottom of the folder, a flash drive. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I plugged it into my laptop. It contained video files. Dozens of them. Dated going back 6 months to before I'd even installed the cameras. The first video showed me sleeping. Filmed from the foot of my bed. 10 minutes of footage of me unconscious, vulnerable, completely unaware. The timestamp was from October. The second showed me in my kitchen, making coffee, scratching my ass, just waking up. Filmed from near the ceiling. From December. The third showed me in the shower. January. They'd been documenting me for 6 months. Had installed their own cameras, hidden ones, professional ones, ones I never detected, and had been watching me live my life. Eating. Sleeping. Showering. Working. Existing. I watched 23 videos before I had to stop. Before I vomited into my trash can, my whole body shaking with a combination of violation and terror and rage so profound I couldn't think straight. The last video on the drive was dated yesterday. It showed me installing a new deadbolt on my back door. Showed me testing it multiple times. Showed me looking satisfied, thinking I was making myself safer. And then it showed someone, wearing black tactical gear, face obscured by a balaclava, walking up to that same door 3 hours later. Pulling out a key. My new key. The one that should have been unique, that should have been secure. Opening the door easily. Walking inside. Standing in my kitchen. Looking directly at the hidden camera they'd installed. Waving. They had copies of my keys. All of them. Every lock I changed, they already had access to. The locksmith, I'd used the same one twice. Or the hardware store where I'd gotten copies made. Or they'd simply picked the locks and made impressions. However they'd done it, I was never secure. Was never safe. Had never been safe. I called the troopers again. This time they took it seriously. Came with detectives, forensic techs, the whole apparatus of criminal investigation. Found the hidden cameras, 4 of them, professionally installed, with long-life batteries and wireless transmission capabilities. Found evidence of repeated intrusion. Documented everything. But they never found who did it. The cameras had been wiped clean of prints. The notes had no forensic value. The locksmith kept terrible records. The hardware store had no security footage going back far enough. Every trail went cold. The working theory, a former homeowner had kept a key, had become obsessed with the new resident, had escalated from simple breaking and entering to full stalking behavior. Or a previous tenant from when the house was a rental. Or someone from the photography community who knew my schedule, knew when I'd be out shooting. But I know it's more than that. Because after all the evidence was collected, after the police declared the case open but stagnant, after I moved to an apartment in downtown Fairbanks with security guards and keycard access, I received a package. Inside, a calendar. Printed. Bound. Professional quality. Covering the next 2 years. With every significant Aurora night marked. And on each date, a number. A countdown. The calendar started at 847. Today, it's at 791. I don't know what happens when it reaches 0. Don't know what they're counting down to. Don't know if it's a threat or a promise or just psychological torture designed to keep me in a constant state of fear. I don't shoot auroras anymore. Can't. The sight of green light in the sky makes me physically ill. I had a panic attack last month during a rare aurora visible from Anchorage, where I moved after Fairbanks became unbearable. Ended up in the ER, sedated, diagnosed with acute anxiety disorder and PTSD. I take pills now. 4 different kinds. Klonopin for the panic. Ambien for the nightmares where someone stands at the foot of my bed, watching. Zoloft for the depression. Processing for the night terrors where I wake up screaming, convinced someone is in my apartment. The psychiatrist says I'm making progress. Says the stalker is gone, probably scared off by police involvement, probably moved on to easier targets. Says I need to reclaim my sense of safety, rebuild my life, return to the things I love. But last week I received another package. No return address. Inside, a photograph. One of mine. From that night on Esterdome. March 27th. The career-defining shot, the red corona, the image I'd been so proud of. Except I'd never shown it to anyone. Never posted it online. Never printed it. It existed only on my computer, in my private files, password protected, encrypted. And on the back of the photograph, in that same precise handwriting, you were right to use f/2.8. The chromatic aberration adds character. But next time, try the rockin' on. You'll see the difference. They still have access to my files, to my work, to my life. The calendar continues its countdown, and I have no idea what happens when it reaches 0. No idea what they want. No idea who they are or why they chose me. I just know that somewhere in Alaska, someone is watching. Someone who understands light and photography and beauty. Someone who has transformed the most beautiful thing I've ever known, the aurora borealis, into a trigger for terror. Someone patient enough to plan for years, sophisticated enough to evade detection, and obsessed enough to never stop. The countdown continues. 791 days. Then 790. Then 789. And when it reaches 0, I think I'll finally understand what they want from me. What they've been building toward. What all of this has been preparing me for. I'm not sure I'll survive that understanding. But at this point, survival feels less important than knowing. Then finally seeing the face behind the violation. Then understanding why someone would take the most beautiful thing in my life and weaponize it against me. The auroras still dance over Alaska. People still chase them with cameras and wonder. But I know the truth now. Know that sometimes the people watching the lights aren't the only ones watching. That sometimes beauty attracts predators more dangerous than darkness ever could. And somewhere, someone is counting down. Waiting. Planning. Preparing for whatever comes at 0. I'll be ready. Or I won't. Either way, the calendar doesn't care. I became a fisheries enforcement officer because my father was one, and his father before him, and in Alaska you either honor your lineage or you get the fuck out and move to Seattle to sell insurance. I'm Jennifer Kowalski, 42 years old, born in Sitka, raised on boats, and I know Southeast Alaska's waters the way most people know their own living rooms. Every inlet, every channel, every rock that'll tear your hull open if you're stupid enough to ignore the charts. For 18 years I patrolled these waters, sighted poachers, enforced quotas, and maintained the delicate balance between commercial fishing and conservation. I thought I'd seen everything. Illegal crab pots, falsified catch logs, boats dumping waste in protected areas. The usual sins of men who value profit over preservation. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the summer of 2023, when I started hunting a boat that shouldn't exist. The reports started in June. Fishermen calling in sightings of a vessel operating in closed zones near Admiralty Island, pulling pots during restricted hours, fishing in marine sanctuaries where commercial operations are federally prohibited. Always at dusk. Always gone before anyone could get close enough to read the registration numbers. A ghost boat, they called it. Said it appeared out of fog banks like something conjured, fished for maybe 30 minutes, then vanished. I didn't believe in ghosts. Believed in criminals who knew how to exploit the gaps in patrol schedules. Believed in sophisticated poachers with fast boats and good intelligence. So I started hunting. July 8th, I got my first visual. I was running patrol near Peril Strait around 9 p.m., that weird Alaska summer twilight where the sun never quite sets, just hovers at the horizon like it's forgotten how to go down. My radar picked up a contact in a restricted zone, moving slowly, probably working gear. I throttled up, my enforcement vessel cutting through the calm water, ready to issue citations and impound equipment. But when I got within a quarter mile, the contact vanished. Not moved away, vanished. 1 second on radar, the next second gone. I circled the area for an hour. Nothing. No boat. No wake. No disturbance on the water. Like I'd imagined the whole thing. Except I hadn't. The radar recording showed it clearly. A 30-foot vessel, consistent signature, definitely real. Then nothing. Equipment malfunction, I told myself. Radar glitch. Solar activity fucking with electronics. I filed a maintenance request and forgot about it. But the reports kept coming. Other officers saw it. Fishermen saw it. Always the same, operating illegally, then disappearing before interception. And always at dusk, during that liminal hour when light and dark negotiate their daily treaty. I became obsessed. Started planning my patrols around the sightings, looking for patterns. And I found one. The ghost boat appeared in zones where I wasn't supposed to be. Where my patrol schedule, publicly available information, posted on the Fish and Wildlife website for transparency, indicated I'd be somewhere else. Whoever operated that boat knew my schedule. Was deliberately avoiding me. August 3rd, I decided to break protocol. Didn't file a patrol plan. Didn't log my route. Just went dark, shut off my transponder, and positioned myself in Catherine Island waters where the ghost boat had been sighted 3 times in the previous 2 weeks. And I waited. Around 8:30 p.m., my radar lit up. There. A vessel, maybe 3 miles south, moving into restricted waters. I approached slowly, running dark, no lights, using the islands as cover. Got within half a mile before they would have spotted me. That's when I saw something that made my stomach drop. The boat wasn't fleeing. Wasn't reacting to my presence at all. Because they already knew I was there. I watched through binoculars as someone on deck, too far to identify, raised a hand and waved. Directly at me. At my hidden position. Then the boat turned and accelerated, disappearing into Chatham Strait faster than any commercial fishing vessel should be able to move. I pursued, pushed my engines to maximum, but they were gone. Vanished into the maze of islands and channels like they never existed. When I got home that night to my apartment in Sitka, I couldn't sleep. Kept seeing that wave. That casual acknowledgement of my presence from someone who shouldn't have known I was there. I'd told no one about my plan. Had made the decision that morning. There was no way they could have known. Unless they were monitoring me. Tracking me somehow. But how? My boat was inspected regularly. My radio communications were encrypted. My phone was department issued and secure. I started checking. Really checking. Tore apart my boat during my off days, looking for tracking devices, bugs, anything that would explain how they knew my position. Found nothing. Checked my apartment. My car. My phone. Nothing. But the encounters continued. 5 more times in August. Every time I went dark, tried to surprise them, they were ready. They always knew. And each time, that fucking wave. That mocking acknowledgement. September 12th changed everything. I'd been tracking the ghost boat for 3 months, and I finally got a break. A commercial fisherman named Dave Hutchins called it in, said the ghost boat was anchored in a small cove on the west side of Baranof Island, tucked into a spot not visible from the main channels. He only spotted it because engine trouble had forced him to deviate from his usual route. I responded immediately, brought back up 2 other enforcement officers, Mike Chen and Sarah Volkov. We approached the cove carefully, weapons ready, prepared for confrontation. This was it. Finally, the boat was there. A 32-foot commercial fishing vessel, registration numbers visible but covered in grime. Alaska registration AF 2847. I ran the numbers. The boat had been decommissioned 8 years ago. Sold for scrap. Shouldn't exist. We boarded it carefully. The deck was empty. Gear was stored neatly, professional setup, expensive equipment, everything well maintained. But no crew. No one aboard. The engine was cold. The boat hadn't been operated in hours, maybe days. Mike checked the cabin while Sarah and I examined the hold. That's where we found them. Dozens of waterproof cases, stacked carefully, labeled with dates. I opened the first one. Inside, documents. Printouts. Photographs. All of me. My patrol schedules for the last 2 years. Not the public ones, the actual ones, including my unreported routes, my spontaneous decisions, my dark patrols. Someone had documented every single movement I'd made for 24 months. Every route. Every stop. Every deviation from protocol. The photographs were worse. Me at the dock. Me at the grocery store. Me at the harbor bar having drinks with friends. Me in my apartment, taken through the window, getting dressed, eating dinner, watching TV. Hundreds of photos, organized chronologically, tracking my life with obsessive precision. Sarah found the laptop. It was running, password unprotected, like they wanted us to see. The screen showed a map of Southeast Alaska with my current position marked in real time. A tracking program. Sophisticated. Professional grade. And according to the logs, it had been running for 2 years. But there was more. Files labeled with my name, containing information that shouldn't exist outside of classified personnel databases. My home address. My phone number. My bank account details. My medical records. My therapy sessions after my divorce. My prescription medications. Everything. My entire life digitized and cataloged by someone with serious resources and absolutely no respect for privacy or law. Mike found the navigation logs. The ghost boat had been everywhere I'd been, always staying just far enough away to avoid direct contact, always watching. For 2 years, someone had shadowed my every movement, learning my patterns, my habits, my routines. Building a comprehensive profile of my life. And in a waterproof folder on the navigation desk, a uniform. Alaska Wildlife Trooper's uniform. My exact size. My badge number. And a mask. A silicone mask of my face, so realistic I felt my gorge rise when Sarah held it up. Professional quality prosthetic, the kind used in movies, perfect down to the small scar on my left cheek from a fishing hook while I was 16. Someone had been impersonating me. Using my identity. My authority. My face. We searched the boat for 3 hours, documented everything, called in federal agents. The FBI took over, fingerprinted every surface, seized the computer equipment, the documents, the mask, everything. But there were no prints. No DNA. No forensic evidence at all. Whoever had been operating this boat knew how to avoid leaving traces. The boat itself was registered to a shell company that didn't exist. The equipment was purchased with cryptocurrency through untraceable channels. The computer's IP logs showed connections from dozens of locations across Alaska and the Pacific Northwest, all public Wi-Fi networks, all dead ends. But they found something else. Something that made everything worse. The laptop contained access logs to restricted Alaska Department of Fish and Game databases. Someone had been inside our systems, copying files, reading confidential enforcement reports, accessing personnel records. And the access timestamps corresponded perfectly with nights when I'd been home, asleep, my department laptop supposedly secure in my apartment. They'd hacked my computer. Remotely. Had been reading my files, my communications, my case notes. Everything I knew, they knew. Every investigation I'd worked, they monitored. I hadn't been hunting them. They'd been studying me, using my own tools against me, staying always one step ahead because they could see every move I planned before I made it. The federal investigation expanded. Found evidence of identity theft. Someone using my credentials had accessed restricted fishing areas, approved permits that shouldn't have been approved, falsified inspection reports. They'd been operating under my identity for months, maybe longer, using me as a cover for illegal operations I didn't even know about. 3 fishing companies were under investigation for quota violations. All had paperwork signed by me, digitally signed with my credentials, on dates when I had solid alibis elsewhere. Someone had stolen my digital identity and used it to facilitate commercial fishing crimes worth potentially millions of dollars. I was suspended pending investigation. Standard protocol when an officer's credentials are compromised. They said they believed me, said they knew I wasn't involved, but I had to be benched while they sorted it out. Sorted out how much damage had been done using my name, my authority, my face. I should have felt relieved. The investigation wasn't targeting me. The evidence clearly showed I was a victim. But I didn't feel like a victim. I felt violated. Exposed. Like someone had skinned me and worn my identity like a coat. The suspension became administrative leave. Then medical leave. Then permanent disability after I had a complete breakdown in the Fish and Game office, screaming at my own reflection in the bathroom mirror because I couldn't trust that it was really me looking back. They found the person eventually. Or at least, they found a person. Former commercial fisherman, lost his permit due to repeated violations, harbored a grudge against enforcement officers. Had some technical skills. Fit the profile. He was arrested in Juneau, charged with identity theft, computer crimes, stalking. But I know it wasn't just him. The operation was too sophisticated. Too well-funded. Too professional. The mask alone cost thousands of dollars. The hacking required expertise beyond what one disgruntled fisherman could possess. He was a fall guy, maybe. Or a participant. But not the architect. Someone else was involved. Someone with resources. Someone still out there. I know because the photographs haven't stopped. Even after the arrest. Even after I moved to Anchorage, changed my name legally, started over. I still receive them. Always by mail. No return address. No postage. Hand-delivered. Me walking my dog last Tuesday. Me buying coffee on Thursday. Me sitting in my new therapist's office on Friday afternoon. I take 4 medications now just to function. Benzodiazepines for the panic attacks that hit when I see boats, any boats, even pictures of boats. Antipsychotics for the dissociative episodes where I can't recognize my own face in mirrors. Sleep medication for the nightmares where I'm drowning while someone wearing my face watches from the shore. And trichotillomania medication for the compulsive hair pulling that started 3 months ago, bald patches on my scalp hidden under hats. My therapist says I have complex PTSD. Says the violation of identity causes profound psychological damage. Says I need to rebuild my sense of self, establish boundaries, learn to trust again. But how do you trust your own identity when someone has proven they can steal it? How do you trust your face when you've seen someone else wearing it? How do you trust anything when the system's designed to protect you, computer security, personnel databases, law enforcement protocols, all failed completely? Last week I received a package. Heavier than usual. Inside, my old badge. The real one, not a replica. The one I turned in when I went on medical leave. That should have been locked in evidence storage in Juneau. Somehow, they'd gotten it. Stolen it from a secure facility. And underneath the badge, a photograph. Recent. Taken from inside my new apartment in Anchorage. Me sleeping in my bed. And reflected in the window glass behind me, barely visible, but definitely there, a figure. Wearing Alaska Wildlife Trooper uniform. Wearing my face. They know where I live. Know what I look like now, after the weight loss from stress, after I cut my hair short, after I changed everything I could change about my appearance. They're still watching. Still documenting. Still wearing my identity like a mask. And the worst part, the thing that keeps me awake even through the medication, is knowing that somewhere in Alaska, someone is walking around with my face. My credentials. My authority. Doing things I'll never know about. Making decisions in my name. Living a parallel version of my life that I have no control over. The FBI says the case is closed. Says they got their man. Says I'm safe now. But I know better. I know that somewhere, my ghost is still fishing. Still operating. Still wearing my face and using my name and existing in spaces I'll never see. And every time I look in a mirror, I have to wonder if what's looking back is really me, or if I'm the ghost now, and the real Jennifer Kowalski is somewhere else, living the life that was stolen from me. I don't go near water anymore. Can't. The sight of boats triggers something primal and terrifying. I had a panic attack at the Anchorage harbor last month, ended up sedated in the ER, convinced that every person I saw was wearing my face. Maybe they were. Maybe they weren't. I can't tell anymore. Can't trust my own perceptions. Can't trust that anything is real. All I know is that somewhere in Alaska, in the cold waters between islands, there's a boat with my name on it. And someone wearing my face is standing on the deck, waving at the darkness, mocking the idea that identity is something you can own. Something you can protect. Something that can't be stolen and worn and used until you don't recognize yourself anymore. The ghost vessel still sails. And I'm the one who disappeared.